Hello viewers, welcome to my channel De Facto with Naomi. Before watching further, please like and share this video and subscribe to my channel. I have covered the historical backdrop of the G20 and India's achievements during its presidency tenure in my previous video. You'll find the link in the description box below. The Met Gala of the G20 Leaders Summit came to an end on 10th September 2023. And what a diplomatic celebration it was. What a diplomatic win. India has yet again created history for all of the world to witness. And my absolute admiration and appreciation goes to Amitabh Kant, S. Shankar and Ajit Doval under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. During the very first session of the Leaders Summit itself, Prime Minister Modi called upon the African Union to be a part of the G20. It is in this one moment that we gave a voice to 17% of the world population. The chairperson of the African Union, Azali Assoumani, later remarked that he was apprehensive about a permanent seat in the G20, that he expected elaborate discussions and debates to take place. Perhaps he didn't expect to be a part of the grouping at all. So it was an extremely overwhelmingly emotional moment for him when he was asked to take his place at the round table by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And it was pricelessly beautiful for Indians because we made it happen. And look at the sheer beauty of it all. In the very second session, we unanimously adopted the Delhi Declaration. And this is amid speculation by Western media that the Leaders Summit will be the ultimate doomsday for India because we wouldn't be able to build consensus. This is just days after China's Khartoum aggression and its attempts to cast a shadow on India's G20 Leaders Summit countdown. This 32-page document has taken up a myriad range of issues like climate change, climate financing, crypto asset and market regulation. It's talked about financial sector reforms, counter-terrorism, money laundering and the like. But today, we will be focusing on the three most important takeaways from the summit. We have lived up to our G20 motto of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. We have truly succeeded in making the whole world our family. When I made my previous video, I spoke to you about the G20. Today, we are here to talk about the revitalized G21. First chapter is titled Undoing of the Historical Wrongs. Through India's relentless efforts, the African Union has been admitted as a permanent member of the G20. So now we have the G21. Every global forum ought to have a representation of all nations, not merely the rich ones and the prosperous ones, but of all. The mother continent of Africa will finally witness a new dawn. A new era where its voice will be heard and due recognition will be accorded to its particular issues and concerns. The idea of including the AU in the G20 grouping emerged at the Voice of the Global South Summit at the beginning of the year. In a huge way, the historical wrong of invisibilizing and silencing the voices of 1.4 billion inhabitants has finally been undone under the leadership of India. India has lent a voice to the African Union. It is because of India's proposals and persistence that the African Union has been included as a part of the G20. But what is the African Union? And why does its presence and representation in multilateral forums like G20 matter in the first place? The African Union is composed of 55 countries. It has its headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Its current chairperson is Azali Assoumani, who is the president of Comoros since 2019. The African Union together makes up the 11th biggest economy of the world. It is fast growing, still very resource rich in a world that is becoming increasingly resource deficient and makes up one of the youngest demographics in the world. The opportunities are numerous and 6 of the world's fastest growing economies are located in the African continent. So realistically speaking, the absence of the African Union was unjust and inequitable, especially because Europe, a part of the global north, is represented by 3 countries, that is France, Germany and Italy as permanent members, plus Spain as a permanent guest invitee, plus European Union comprising of 28 countries, while the whole of Africa was formally represented by just one nation, that is South Africa. This was problematic because on the one hand, we had the European Union with 28 countries having a say in the G20, but another grouping of 55 countries, that is African Union, having no say in the G20 whatsoever. This has now been done away with. Let us now have a look at India's engagement with the African Union. India's engagement with the African Union has not been an overnight exercise. Work in the background has been going on for nearly a decade. 40 heads of states from the African Union were a part of the third India-Africa Forum Summit in October 2015. Prime Minister Modi has personally visited 10 African nations in the last 9 years, and all of the 55 African nations have had ministerial level visits by India under the Africa Outreach Initiative of India. This is also positive news for the African Union because several of the African nations are today plagued by the debt trap policies of the Chinese. With the inclusion of the African Union in the G20, we can be sure about a positive tilt and a positive shift of the African Union towards the Indian side. And what exactly does India gain from the onboarding of the African Union in the G20? Firstly, India's success in including the African Union in the G20 helps position itself as a leader of the Global South, of the developing and the underdeveloped world. Secondly, this move also helps India in securing 55 votes for the permanent membership of the UNSC. The United Nations Security Council presently has 5 permanent members, and India has been trying to become a part of this league for several decades now. Now, digressing a tiny little bit, and this is something that is personally interesting to me, there have been certain African nations that have made headlines in 2023. 2 of the African nations have made headlines in 2023 for reasons of turbulence and trouble. There have been successful coups in Niger and more recently in Gabon. And looking at the larger picture, in totality, 6 nations have had coups since 2020. So we have Guinea, Mali, Burkina Faso, Chad, Niger and Gabon. It's been dubbed as a coup epidemic, a coup contagion and a francophone spring by the popular media. Now let's get back to G20's Delhi Declaration. Another big win for India is that Russia was not condemned in harsh tones in the Delhi Declaration of the G20, as it was in the Bali Declaration. Our declaration talks about the war in Ukraine with regard to global food and energy security, supply chains, macro-financial stability, inflation and growth, which has complicated the policy environment in developing and least developed countries. But the Delhi Declaration has not condemned Russia, not proposed to impose further sanctions, not spoken about isolating it further, and finally not painted Russia in the light of a villain. It has merely reiterated Prime Minister Modi's words to President Putin, that is, today's era is not of war. Our declaration calls for peace and respect of territorial integrity, as also stated in the UN Charter. Ukraine, of course, is not too happy and suggests that at the very least, the language of the Bali Declaration ought to have echoed in the Delhi Declaration. On the other hand, President Putin's aide has called India's G20 declaration a stellar success. This is, in fact, a huge success because as against other global groups like the SCO and the BRICS, where Western nations are either absent or scarcely present, the G20 is a grouping that has a huge participation from countries that are supporters and providers of the Ukrainian cause. The maturity of the global diplomacy has prevailed above all. It is remarkable that President Erdogan, who is playing the peacemaker in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, has remarked during the G20 Leaders Summit, and I quote, "Any initiative that isolates Russia is bound to fail." This is being hailed as Turkey's big pro-Russia push by the world at large, and this is our second takeaway. And the third and final takeaway is the proposal of the India, Middle East, European corridor to counter the Chinese BRI. We are calling it the new spice route as against the Chinese BRI, which is called the new Silk Road. It will link India, West Asia and Europe. This network will include shipping routes and railway lines. The countries that are a part of it include India from the east, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan and Israel from West Asia, and from Europe we have the EU. The US will be investing heavily in its development, but given its geography, it is not directly linked to it so far. According to the White House press statement of 9 September 2023, the IMEC will comprise of two separate corridors, the East Corridor connecting India to the Arabian Gulf and the Northern Corridor connecting the Arabian Gulf to Europe. It will include a railway that upon completion will provide a reliable and cost-effective cross-border ship-to-rail transit network to supplement existing maritime and road transport routes, enabling goods and services to transit to, from and between India, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel and Europe. So this will obviously be a game changer in stimulating economic activity through enhanced connectivity and economic integration between Europe, the Arabian Gulf and Asia. And I'm sure that we'll see the ripple effects of this project and how it will go on to positively impact the world economy in the years to come. And it's a wrap from my side. I'll see you in my next video as promised. Thanks for watching. Stay well, stay healthy and stay out of trouble. Over and out.